Hello, Mercedes. Good to see you. Good to see you too. Am I going to talk in a minute? I've got my marching orders from Mercedes, so I'm in better shape today. First of all, thank you, Mike, very much for that kind introduction and your support to this very important conference. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. First of all, let me acknowledge and thank Yuri Cormier and the Conference of Defense Association Institutes and their president, General Guy Thibault. Thank you for holding this valuable dialogue year after year, and I also want to say how difficult it is, and this isn't the first time I've had to follow General Thibault to the mic. It's always a bit of a challenge, but it's always a privilege, sir. I also like to thank all of you for joining us here today. To the senators, to the members of the House of Commons, members of the Canadian Armed Forces, distinguished guests from around the world. And if I may, I'd like to also extend a particularly warm welcome to my Latvian counterpart and good friend, Defense Minister Andris Spruds, who's joined us all the way from Riga. And he is here as well to acknowledge the important relationship that has developed between Canada and Latvia as part of our NATO commitments in that country. I also want to take the opportunity to recognize our Chief of Defense Staff, General Wayne Eyre. General, this is an opportunity to thank you, and I hope I have many more opportunities to thank you for your decades of service to this country. Colleagues and friends, as you all know, and as your report last night tells you, we live in times of great challenge and uncertainty. Whether it's the war in Ukraine, conflict in the Middle East, or tensions in the Indo-Pacific, whether it's new threats to our Arctic sovereignty, rapid technological advances, changes to our climate, in our interconnected world, all of these challenges are having a direct impact on Canada and on Canadians. And this is having a direct impact as well on our national security, our prosperity, and our way of life. And as some global actors seek to challenge the international rules that we have built up, Canada is and must increase its investments in security and defence. But let me acknowledge, we have done much work. We have much more work to do. We're boosting our contributions to our international alliances. We're doubling down to protect the rules-based international order that has kept us safe for nearly 80 years. I think at this point, there is no, we've read recently in the press, and I actually want to thank Murray Brewster for his reporting yesterday, bringing to the attention of Canadians the state of readiness and preparation of the Canadian Armed Forces. And as former Admiral Mark Norman stated, this is decades in the making. I really see no point in us spending a lot of time trying to find out how we got to this state. We must focus on what needs to be done, and we must get to work. We've got a great deal of work to do, and that's what I'd like to talk to you briefly about today. First of all, the war in Ukraine. I was just in Kyiv with Prime Minister Trudeau and Deputy Prime Minister Freeland to mark the 2-year anniversary of Putin's full-scale invasion of that country, and the opportunity to see up close the devastation that Russian forces have caused. We met Ukrainian troops who bravely defended the Hostomel airport in the early hours of the war, one of Russia's first major strategic failures, and a sign of things to come. I had the chance to witness firsthand the unbreakable spirit of the Ukrainian people as they continue to fight for their homeland and their freedom, and their future, to be frank, which is also our future. Canada has been there to support our Ukrainian friends from day one in collaboration with more than 50 allies and partners. And while in Kyiv, the Prime Minister signed a historic security cooperation agreement with Ukraine. It lays out our long-term support for Ukraine as it defends its sovereignty and territorial integrity, it protects its people, and helps to rebuild their economy and create a stable and secure future for that country. It includes over $3 billion in financial military aid for this year alone. And altogether, so far, Canada has committed more than $4 billion in military assistance since the war began, everything from tanks to armored vehicles to ammunition to drones. We've also been helping Ukraine protect its systems from malicious cyber activity and sharing vital intelligence. And I'm very proud to say we've trained members of the Ukrainian military, their combat medics and sappers in Poland, new recruits in the United Kingdom, junior officers in Latvia, and many more. And in fact, beginning in 2015, since 2015, we trained more than 40,000 members of the Ukraine's military through Operation Unifier. We've been teaching everything from combat survivability to patrol tactics to demining. And earlier this week, I had the opportunity and privilege to visit CFB Edmonton to meet with Canadian troops there who have trained Ukrainians with life-saving demining skills. We must keep going, because Ukraine's fight for freedom is a fight for democracy itself. And when despots like Vladimir Putin invade their neighbors at will, it undermines the international rules that have kept us safe for over 80 years, and it threatens the sovereignty and security of all nations. The world must stand for it. and I want to assure you Canada will not stand for it. We will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. And on that note today, and because I'm a politician, I'll make a few announcements. I'm announcing a new initiative that will help keep Canadian innovators developing solutions that will help Ukraine move forward and clear their minefields. Through D&D's Ideas program, we're launching a challenge to Canadian innovators in English and French and in Ukrainian. Successful applicants could receive up to $1 million to develop their concepts, and our goal is to generate solutions that can be demonstrated to Canadian and Ukrainian military experts as early as next year. This project will fund the best concepts that could save Ukrainian lives and protect crucial Ukrainian military equipment. I'll also share with you that when I went to Ukraine, and the General and I had an opportunity to meet with their Minister of Strategic Defense, he told us that they've learned a great deal about fighting the Russians over the past 2 years, and they're willing to share that learning with us. And I think that's an opportunity not only for our military, but for Canadian industry as well, because the nature of warfare has evolved very significantly on the Ukrainian battlefields, and we have an opportunity to learn from that experience to apply it to our own future. In addition to some of the demining expertise that Ukraine has received from us, they've also made it very clear they need artillery ammunition. They need it now, and they need it for the long term. Now, we've donated tens of thousands of rounds of NATO standard 155 artillery ammunition to Ukraine. But Ukraine needs much more ammunition, and quite frankly, so does Canada and the Canadian Armed Forces. So today, I'm announcing again that we are investing $4.4 million with General Dynamics Ordnance and Tactical Systems and IMT Defense. This funding is going to enable these Canadian manufacturers to develop detailed plans to modernize production and ramp up production capacity for 155 ammunition. This planning is going to facilitate the next steps. We've already made investments to increase production of artillery ammunition here in Canada, but as I have acknowledged, there's a great deal more work to do. And I'd like to assure Canadians that we are working with industry right now on ways to substantially increase the production of this ammunition in Canada, and I hope that we will have much more to say about this in the very near future, because we need to increase our ability to defend ourselves, to support our allies, and to arm our friends in Ukraine. And as we support Ukraine, we're also helping to protect NATO's eastern flank, as I referenced earlier when I introduced my good friend from Latvia. We're proud to lead NATO's Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group in Latvia. We're more than doubling our military presence in Latvia to full brigade size, with up to 2,200 persistently deployed troops by 2026. And we are working hard to make sure that those troops have the equipment that they need. Canada has already deployed 15 Leopard 2 tanks to Latvia, and starting this summer, we'll begin deploying helicopters as well. Last year at this conference, my predecessor, Minister Anand, announced that Canada would use urgent operational requirements to acquire additional equipment for our Latvian forces. We required new anti-tank weapons, air defense capabilities, and counter-drone equipment. And today I can tell you that all of those contracts are now signed, and we will begin delivering this much-needed and essential armaments to our troops in Latvia later this year. This is an example of defense procurement done differently. It's also an example of defense procurement done right. We're also bringing our cyber expertise to our NATO allies, including in Latvia, where we've deployed military and civilian personnel to help protect critical networks there. And in fact, a report that was published by the British House of Commons Intelligence and Security Committee stated that Canada is, with the UK, and I quote, at the head of the pack on cybersecurity. So as NATO marks its 75th anniversary, Canada's commitment to the alliance is strong and will get stronger. But as the Prime Minister committed in Vilnius last year, we must and will do more. If I may now move briefly to the Indo-Pacific, which is another priority for Canada. As a Pacific nation ourselves, the Indo-Pacific is crucial to our security and prosperity. 6 of our top trading partners are located in that region. And that's why we're building closer ties with many of those partners. As part of our Indo-Pacific strategy, Canada is deploying a greater number of ships and personnel to the region. And last year, for the first time in decades, we deployed 3 warships into the Indo-Pacific. We sailed through the Taiwan Strait. We will continue to do so, and we will continue to do more. We've hard at work to strengthen our defense relationships with like-minded partners, which is why last September, Canada and ASEAN launched our strategic partnership. And it's why we've signed a memorandum of understanding on defense cooperation with the Philippines in January. The Indo-Pacific is vital to our future, and so Canada must do more to maintain a persistent presence so that we can work with our partners and allies to strengthen the rules and norms that keep Pacific nations safe. And it's a useful reminder that we are also a Pacific nation. None of this work around the world is possible if we are not strong at home here in Canada and secure in North America. But we need to be clear-eyed about the challenges we face. The Arctic is warming at 4 times the global average. The Arctic is becoming more accessible, which means that geography no longer affords us the security that we once relied upon. We know that Russia and China harbor Arctic ambitions, and these have major security implications for Canada. It is incumbent upon us to meet the moment. Through Canada's NORAD modernization plan, we're investing almost $40 billion to modernize our NORAD capabilities over the next 20 years. This modernization is going to be absolutely essential to our national security. It will strengthen the extraordinary alliance that Canada and the United States share, an alliance unlike any other in the world. Our NORAD investments are taking shape, and we will be building a new Arctic over-the-horizon radar that will vastly improve our threat detection. We'll be upgrading our infrastructure in places like Alert, Inuvik, Yellowknife, and Goose Bay, in consultation with Indigenous and Northern partners. And where possible, we will be investing in airfields, roadways, infrastructure that will prioritize dual use that can meet the needs of the military and benefit our communities in the north. And beyond NORAD modernization, in November I announced that Canada is purchasing up to 16 P-8 Poseidon aircraft, an investment of nearly $10.4 billion. These are state-of-the-art multi-mission aircraft which strengthen Canada's ability to conduct maritime and overland surveillance here at home and to support our allies. They're among the major defence procurements currently underway in Canada, and as I've said, we have much more to do. With respect to the Air Force, I'm pleased to see General Kenny here this morning. We've been able to complete the purchase acquisition of a new fleet of 88 F-35 fifth-generation fighters. It takes time to deliver them, but they will be delivered and they'll be implemented into our new Air Force. We're also investing in new tanker and transport aircraft, and we have begun to deliver up to 9 of those aircraft in the immediate future. As I've said, we've also acquired the P-8 contract and 11 new RPAS drones. These investments are going to give our Air Force the capability that it requires to fulfill the mission that we task them with. And at the same time, let me also acknowledge, it takes time to deliver this equipment. We're going to have to make sure that we maintain our current fleet of aircraft to make sure that we can continue to do the missions required of us. We're making significant new investments in the Navy. We have 15 new Canadian surface combatant ships, Arctic offshore patrol vessels that we are investing in. But we are also facing an enormous challenge because it takes time to deliver those important new platforms. And so we have to invest in supporting and maintaining our existing fleet of Halifax ships. We're also investing in armored combat support vehicles and the LC-41SR technology for the Army. We have much more to do. These capabilities will allow us to project power further, farther, and faster, and for far longer. They will make it even more costly for any aggressor to challenge our sovereignty in our north. And put together, these capabilities will mean that Canada will be better able to protect our Arctic, to patrol our coastline, and to strengthen our national security. Canada's defence spending is actually doubling from about $18 billion a year to over $40 billion a year between 2016 and 26-27. But in a world as dangerous as ours, with the new threat environment that we're facing, we know that we need to do much more. And I want to assure everyone in this room, we will do more. From the emergence of drones to the increased importance of air defence, to the necessity of cutting-edge radars to defend our continent, we know that much has changed over the past few years. To contend with the return of large-scale land warfare and to contribute to NATO, Canada needs more artillery ammunition, the industrial capacity to produce it, and long-range precision strike capabilities. There is an urgent need in Canada and all NATO countries to increase our production capacity, not just in artillery shells, but in all military production. Because production is deterrence. And a stronger defence industrial base is going to make us stronger and less susceptible to coercion. In general, I hear very clearly the dismissal of some as lobbyists and business interests. I disagree completely. And with our new defence policy update, I see it not only as military policy and foreign policy, but it's industrial policy as well. Because quite clearly, our industrial partners need the clarity and the certainty that that update will provide They need to know where Canada is going. They need to know what industries and products they'll have to produce in order to support our defence mission in Canada. And we need to provide them with that certainty. To deal with the new challenges to our Arctic security, we're going to need persistent underwater surveillance capabilities and a robust network of Arctic infrastructure that's going to allow us to project power in our region and to maintain a meaningful presence here. I've spoken to the people in the North, and when we talk about Arctic sovereignty, they say it isn't the episodic flyover of a plane or even a ship passing by off the coast, that we need a persistent presence, that we have to invest in infrastructure, invest in our security. If we do not defend our sovereignty in the far north, then it is no longer our sovereignty. And so that is our obligation. It is our commitment. And I want to acknowledge to you all, we know we must do more, and we will be doing more. Demand is the frequency and scale of natural disasters. I have been the minister responsible for calling upon General Eyre on many occasions and asking for the military to come to the aid of Canadians in the face of an emergency. I know that has an enormous impact on our personnel, on their training, and on their readiness and preparedness. And yet, we know that when Canadians need them, the Canadian Armed Forces always answer the call. We're going to need modern tactical aviation capabilities for our Air Force, and we're making those investments. It'll take time to deliver those capabilities, but when they're delivered, our Air Force will be and will remain among the best in the world. Now, it says in my notes, soon we'll be releasing Canada's defence policy update. None of you want to hear me say soon. I don't want to tell you soon. What I can tell you is that we've been working very hard. General Eyre and his command staff team and I have been making our case for what the Canadian Armed Forces needs, what Canada needs in order to fulfill our obligations to our alliance partners, and most importantly, to defend our own country. We will soon be releasing that defence policy update. I don't have a date for you, but I understand its urgency. I feel its urgency. We all feel its urgency. We need that clarity. We need that certainty, and so do our industry partners, so do Canadians, so do our allies. Last year, we launched some consultations to seek feedback, and I have met with many of you to hear your input and your suggestions. We know what needs to be done. We've heard you loud and clear. We know that our updated defence policy must provide Canadian defence industry with the certainty and clarity that it requires to meet the needs of our armed forces. Because building up a more robust domestic defence industry base with the capability to scale is going to help keep Canadians safe. Resilience makes us a harder target. It makes us less susceptible to coercion. And as we provide industry with that certainty it will also be there to help our industry partners, because we're in this together. So we'll be bolstering their cybersecurity, helping them stay resilient, and we'll harness emerging technologies together. And speaking of emerging technologies, artificial intelligence will transform how we defend Canada and Canadians. It's already driving new opportunities, new capabilities, and new risks. And we can't afford to fall behind. And so today, we're launching our new National Defence AI strategy. And this strategy is intended to guide how we use artificial intelligence across defence so that we can become more AI-enabled by 2030. It's going to help us use data and resources more efficiently. And it's going to enable national defence and the Canadian Armed Forces to work more closely with Canada's thriving innovation ecosystem. And to ensure that we use AI in a responsible, ethical, and safe way. And as AI continues to develop at a rapid pace, it's imperative that we remain fully capable and interoperable with our industry partners, our allies, and our defence partners from around the world. And that's exactly what this strategy is intended to enable. I'd like to turn to something that for me is perhaps the most urgent requirement of the Canadian Armed Forces. It's people. We're investing in modernizing our armed forces. We're there to work with our industry partners with the certainty required to support our troops, and our #1 priority must always be the people, men and women, who serve in uniform. None of this work is possible without them. That's why we must invest in new housing for our troops. We gave them a pay raise. We're taking meaningful steps to build a more diverse and inclusive and supportive institution that can attract and retain the talent from all segments of Canadian society. Because the bottom line is, the Canadian Armed Forces must grow. We're short a lot of people, almost 16,000 people at last count, in both our regular forces and reserves. Now, in my conversations with the Canadian Armed Forces, they've told me about all the efforts that they're making, and they've urged us to be patient. But we can't be patient. There is a sense of urgency. We must change the way in which we recruit and retain the people of our forces. And therefore, I've asked our military leaders to take a hard look at expanding eligibility for recruitment, to abolish outdated medical requirements where they are not meaningful and relevant, creating a probationary period to enroll new members, especially permanent residents, and to streamline the security clearances process. We had a remarkable situation where we announced last year that we were going to allow permanent residents to Canada make application for the Canadian Armed Forces. Almost 16,000 people applied. A year later, less than 100 of them have been enrolled in the Canadian Armed Forces. Quite frankly, that's unacceptable. It's an opportunity lost, and we can't afford to lose those opportunities. And so we are going to have to do the work necessary to change. We need to maintain our high standards, and it is not my intention in any way to compromise the remarkable standards of the Canadian Armed Forces that has led to the excellence that we have come to expect. But we also know that far too many people want to join the forces and are being turned away, or they're spending years in the enrollment process. And if you're not the first to call with a job, they'll go somewhere else. And so we must find a way to be first. We must do better. We must be more flexible, and we have to be more creative. But I have every confidence, because in my exposure to leaders of the Canadian Armed Forces, I have seen a capacity for innovation, for flexibility, to get the job done. Churchill once said that sometimes it's not good enough to do your best. You have to do what's required. And I have every confidence that the Canadian Armed Forces will do what's required. We've made some significant strides in Canada to give the military what they need. We have, over a 10-year period, nearly doubled the D&D budget. We're rapidly procuring some key capabilities that our troops require, and we are starting to invest in proven platforms that will boost our interoperability with our allies. But as I've said probably too many times in this speech, I suffer no illusions. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. We're going to have to invest in new capabilities for our military. We're going to have to provide our industry partners with the certainty that they need to meet our requirements. We're going to have to take a fresh look at recruitment and retention and implement new innovative measures that will actually fill the gap. We must also invest in maintaining the equipment that we've got. None of us are happy to see information that more than half of our trucks, more than half of our planes, and more than half of our ships are not available for service because they are in need of parts and repair. And so we're going to have to do better. We're going to have to keep those planes in the air, those ships on land, and most importantly, we're going to have to equip our Army to make sure that they can do the job that we call upon them to do almost every day in order to make sure that they can continue that work while we invest in new equipment for the future. We've got to be there for our people in uniform. They've raised their hands to serve Canada. They are among the very best in our country, and we've got to be there for them. We face a pivotal moment in our history. The global security environment is changing quickly, and new threats are emerging. And as we stare down a future that is fraught with risk and uncertainty, Canada must do whatever it takes to defend our country and to defend the rules that have kept our country and others around the world safe. We have no choice but to fulfill this mission, and we will. Together with our allies, our partners, our defense industry, and all of you, I'm confident that we can strengthen our collective defense, we can uphold our democracy, we can protect our way of life from those who seek to challenge it. Canadians expect this of us. It is our collective responsibility, and we must not fail them. Thank you all very much. Merci beaucoup. And now I ask for a moment. Will I go to the back and they'll mic me up and I'll come back and see Mercedes.
Great. So you're stuck with me for a few minutes while we get Minister Blair mic'd up. A very interesting speech. I'm very curious to ask about the personnel comments. That's the first time I think I've heard something like that in terms of what the changes might be that are coming. I don't need to tell anyone in this room that we're seeing a global and national security environment that is deeply concerning, unique, complex. The national security threats in this country span from Atom-Waffen far-right terrorist groups to right here in Ottawa, the situation we had with two young people plotting a very serious and actually quite advanced plot that had specific targets and dates with TATP explosive, which is quite easy to make with things you get from Home Depot. On top of that, we're dealing with climate change, we're dealing with China, Russia, Iran, the situation in Gaza, the war in Ukraine. I can't remember seeing an environment like this in the 20+ years that I've been around defense. Obviously, we've had world wars which were much more severe than the current situation, but the complexity is what makes it unique. And there's so many questions about Canada's place in all of this and whether we're doing enough, particularly with the looming possibility of another Trump presidency. Come on in, Minister Blair. Right here, please. Thank you.
It's an old rule in policing, you never run to a fight. I'm not going to have one, I'm kidding.
Well, we're going that way. So, speaking of perhaps some controversial comments, I doubt you missed the gasp that went through the room. It is normally quite sedate conference when you talked about the military not moving fast enough, in your opinion, to get people in, perhaps rejecting people who you believe should be in. What are the requirements that you believe are outdated and need to be modernized? Because, you know, whenever we talk about this, the concern is that if you lower the standards, you lower the performance.
Thanks, Mercedes. I think it's an important question. I tried to make the point. I have absolutely no intention of lowering the standards. We expect excellence in our armed forces, and that's what we should seek. But I've had a little bit of experience of going out and having to recruit vast numbers in a hurry. And we need recruiting of vast numbers in a hurry, first of all. And frankly, you have to figure out how to go fast. And there are processes. And I'll just give an example. The permanent residents that applied, we've taken more than 14 months to begin processing those people. Most of that time is being spent in background checks. There are ways to expedite that. There are ways to work more quickly through that. The vast majority of them. Now, I was having a conversation with Rick Hillier the other day. He dropped by to see me, and we're old friends. And he said that when he was recruiting, he remembered that if 10 people came through the door, 2 of them were outstanding. Those are people you want to put in a headlock and just hang on to. 2 are people that would never make the cut, and you just send them out the door. And then you go through all your processes to get the other 6 processed. I think we're going to have to be innovative. I think we've got to recognize that if someone comes in and applies for a job with us, they're probably applying to 4 or 5 other places as well. And if we're not the first to call, they're going to take the job that's offered to them. We've just got to find out how to be the first to call. There are some things that I think we can also consider. You know, one of the things that I was told by the military is, you know, if we hire them, we're stuck with them forever, like we own them forever. And that's why they're so cautious. And I said, well, in every other profession, and certainly the profession I come from, I've spent 40 years in policing, we had a probationary period. And we bring people in on probation. It gave us an opportunity to find out if they were right for us or if we were right for them. And at the end of the probationary period, we'd make a positive decision whether we were going to retain them. The vast majority of them stayed. Some of them just didn't make the cut, and we sent them on their way. But that type of different approach, like if what you have been doing for decades is no longer working for you, you can't just keep doing it. And over the past 3 years, more people have left than have entered. That is frankly, it's a death spiral for the Canadian Armed Forces. We cannot afford to continue on that pace. We've got to do something differently. And I just want to encourage them and let the Canadian Armed Forces know they're going to have my support to be innovative, to do things differently, to do what is required. And you know, I think the same problem persists, by the way, in militaries right around the world. And I've had conversations with a number of my colleagues internationally. And they're all trying new and innovative ways to recruit people into their armed forces. I think we can learn from the experience of others, and I believe there's a real openness in the Canadian military. You know, they're always adapting, and I think the circumstances are such that there's an urgent requirement for us to get those people in the door. And then there's another issue as well, and it's retention. And I think we've also got to look at why people might leave the Canadian Armed Forces when they still got the talent, the energy, the training to serve. And so I think we've just got to think about how we get them in and then how we keep them when they get there.
So I'll be blunt when I say that a lot of the folks I talk to who are leaving say they're leaving because they feel unsupported by this government. They think that the government doesn't take defense seriously, that there's not going to be significant money in the budget, that their equipment continues to fall apart, and is a very slow process to replace it. I mean, ammunition is an example of that. We've known for some time that we've got 3 days worth of ammunition, and there's this very slow process to replace it. I don't even think the tank replacement has started yet. And given, and I want to get into the issues of military procurement with you in a second, but do you think your government bears any responsibility for the way that folks feel about joining the Canadian Armed Forces or getting out before their time is up?
You know, of course. I think all governments, mine, previous governments for decades, bear some responsibility for the current state of preparedness of the Canadian Armed Forces. Quite frankly, when I was given this job, I was given very explicit instructions: go get things done. Move as quickly as possible on the necessary procurements. Work with the Canadian Armed Forces to deal with issues of retention. There are some very important things that are being done in the Canadian military, and I'm finding great partners, quite frankly, in CAF. People who really know that there's a requirement to get things done. Part of it is, you know, and I say it's going to sound flippant. Defense ministers have two very significant challenges: getting the money necessary for defense, and then spending the money necessary for defense. And one of the things that we have found is some of our procurement process, for example, don't move anywhere near as rapidly as we need them to move. We tried a different approach for our troops that we're going to deploy into Latvia. We used what had been previously used in Afghanistan, the urgent operational requirements, to move more quickly on certain procurements. And we got the job done. We also faced, you know, I think, a really interesting question in the replacement of the multi-mission aircraft that the Air Force required, and making choices to go with the only available option or a developmental option. I think it does require a certain amount of discipline and collaboration between us in order to get that job done. I think we've demonstrated that we are capable of getting things done, and I hope that members of the Canadian military also see that they've recently got a well-deserved pay raise. That we are looking very hard at the supports that we provide to them. When I travel to various bases, I was in Edmonton just earlier this week. When I've traveled with the general, we always sit down and talk to the troops, and we talk about their experience in the Canadian Armed Forces and what more we need to do to support them. They're pretty clear. They're not shy. They're not backward about being forward when it comes. I'm impressed by that, by the way, that they'll tell a minister in front of their chief of defense exactly what they're experiencing, and that's a challenge to us, but it's a challenge because we have to respond to it. We have to answer, because as I said, and I really meant it when I said up there, I've been in the uniform business for a very long time. The people that wear those uniforms are the most important resource that we have. Investing in them, supporting them, making sure that they're equipped and capable and trained and able to do the job that we ask of them is our greatest responsibility. It's a responsibility I share with all the people here in uniform, but it's a responsibility that we're going to respond to.
And part of determining what needs to be done is having a plan. And you talked about the defense policy review. I think it's been over a year now since we've been told that it's coming anytime. Obviously, something very significant changed in it from the original version, which was well down the road. You became minister, it got ripped apart. Some people believe that the previous minister was seen to be asking for too much money by the Prime Minister's office, and that was why it was taken apart and revamped. You're now putting your own stamp on it. You've looked at it. Have you scaled back from the original version?
I'm not asking for anything less than my predecessor asked for, but we have tried to apply new focus. And for example, I've placed a great deal of emphasis on our responsibilities in the Canadian far north, to our Arctic sovereignty. I think sometimes the difficulty with, and we went through this with Strong, Secure and Engaged in 2017. I think sometimes those reports, as excellent as they are, and there was some really great work that was done, can be perceived by some as merely a shopping list. And it really is much more than that. Defense policy update, as I said, is foreign policy. It's also industrial policy. It needs to really speak to the challenges that Canada faces and the preparation and work that we must do and the things we must invest in to meet those challenges. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time working on, the General and his team and my team, is placing much greater focus on our responsibilities to continental defense and to Canada's defense here at home. We are also, I think, making real progress in the investments we're making to meet our NATO capabilities and in investments in the Indo-Pacific. As I've said, the challenge of this is not just the acquisition of new platforms. It is also the maintenance of what we've already got. And so there's also budget processes impacted by this. All of that is to say, like I said, I'm reluctant to get up there and say soon. There is an urgency. The Canadian Armed Forces and Canadians need, and our allies need, an update to our defense policy. We did some really good work, I think, in 2017. It required, the strong, secure, and engaged defense policy actually resulted in a very significant increased investment in defense. It's enabled us to buy those fighter aircraft to get, and arrange for their delivery. We've invested in the national shipbuilding strategy. We've been moving ahead on the aircraft and the ships and the equipment that our armed forces need. But the world has changed on us, and it continues to change on us. The challenges that we're facing and what we're learning, actually, from the war in Ukraine demand that we can't just do what we planned to do a decade ago. We're going to have to continue to think about it and evolve and to answer the call and answer the new challenges that we're facing. And so that work has been evolving. We need that update. And we've worked very hard on it, and I'm not going to give you a precise date, but I can tell you I need it urgently, and we're working to get it delivered.
Well, and there is that very real current struggle to maintain the equipment, and there's no doubt your government has purchased some major platforms, all of them pretty much planned by any government that we in. You had to obviously change the position on the F-35 to bring that in. As you say, the world changes, and sometimes your views change once you're in government. You talked about changing procurement, and this is something that I've been watching since 2007. I did a documentary then, and nothing has changed. We had pledges from the Harper government, who introduced the Associate Minister of National Defence. That didn't fix it. You guys have now been in power for almost a decade. You haven't been able to fix it. Why is it so difficult to fix defense procurement, and what do you think needs to be done? Should it be solely the purview of the Minister of National Defence to get that political expediting of critical issues?
I think it's a whole of government response that is required. The procurement is not the sole purview of the Minister of Defence.
But isn't that where it falls apart? Because you don't have a single minister who it can be pinned to.
Well, it falls apart. I think the system can be made to work. And I think we've seen some evidence over the past 8 months where it's starting to work. Like we moved ahead, for example, with the P-8 acquisition. That was complicated, but we got it done. You know, we've moved ahead with some pretty significant investments. I would acknowledge some of the urgency of what we're dealing with our NATO commitment in Latvia, and the urgency that we're dealing with in supporting Ukraine has taught us some new ways of getting things done. And so, you know, we are, I think demonstrating, and this is a whole team effort, by the way. This is, I claim absolutely no credit for this. I just happen to be fortunate enough to be the Minister of Defense at a time when everybody is recognizing the importance and urgency of this. I try not to hold up, no decisions get held up in my desk, but people are doing the work that's necessary, and I think we're starting to demonstrate that we can actually get things delivered, and some of those planes and ships are now being delivered. They take a long time. It reminds me that we have to maintain what we've got. But I don't think that procurement, I joke about how difficult it is to get money and to spend money, but I'm seeing real improvement. I'm seeing a real commitment to go and get the things that are needed. And so we're going to put our head down and we're going to get that done. I've got a bit of a window that I can operate on. And frankly, I only came here to try to get things done, and I've got a pretty good team of people working with me to make sure that happens.
The federal budget is coming down on April 16th, I believe.
I don't know. I don't remember the precise date. You probably know better.
It's burned into my memory immediately. There's a lot of speculation about whether or not we'll see increased defense spending to the tune of 2%. I would personally be shocked by that, because I haven't seen any indicators from your government, nor from, to be fair, many previous Canadian governments, that we were going to get anywhere close to 2%, an additional $18 billion. But you are also contending with increasingly frustrated allies, who journalists like me are hearing from when we talk to them, that Canada is not spending enough, that putting people into Latvia is not considered significant enough given the world that we're dealing with. You have the possibility of a Trump presidency, and him threatening to blow NATO up if people don't spend 2%. And I know you don't believe that he would do that, but a lot of the people who work around him say he almost did it before. Would you look at getting to 2% or publicly committing to that now or in the budget?
Our government's already committed to get to 2%. The Prime Minister did in Vilnius last year. It's going to require a significant increase in spending. And quite frankly, I think that we're also constrained a little bit in our ability to make those dollar commitments by the current fiscal environment. I might as well acknowledge the facts that are before us. But at the same time, we have to spend more on defense. I've said that. The defense policy update that we've been working on will clearly say that. We know the investments that need to be made. We know the people that we're going to need to do the job. And so we're going to have to spend significantly more in defense. I think that the 2%, we work very closely with all of our allies. As I said, the Prime Minister renewed Canada's commitment to reach 2% when he was in Vilnius last year. The timelines for that will be dictated by the availability in Canada of the funds to do that, but we know what needs to be done. Can I also acknowledge, though, the investment in Canada's defence, it took us decades to get where we are. You know, we haven't been at 2% in Canada since 1996. In 2013, we actually dropped to 1%, and in 2014, we dropped below 1%. That's a significant. That creates a hole. That creates a deficit. And I think we should acknowledge that over the past 20 years, we've really struggled with necessary procurements and the things that needed to be done. And we have, I think, a really good plan, for example, for the Navy and the National Shipbuilding Strategy for the building of 15 new surface combatant ships. We've got a plan for the Arctic offshore patrol vessels, some joint support ships that are being built. All of that's proceeding apace. By the way, the Victoria-class submarines aren't going to be with us for that much longer, and we're going to have to invest in a new platform. I mentioned that in my remarks. And so that's another investment that we're going to have to make. But I've also tried to be very clear to our NATO allies. I actually go, and the General shares with me the work that we are doing in Europe in support of our NATO allies. I think in many respects, Canada, really delivers capability, but we need to do more. Latvia gives us an opportunity, I think, to do that, but we clearly need to do more. We're going to have to make some additional investments. But I think in NORAD modernization, over-horizon radars and other things that we'll be investing in are important. But I think one of the things that I've tried to make clear to our NATO allies is that, yes, Canada must and will spend more on defense. What the upper limit of that is, I don't know. But we know we need to do much more. But I think for me, one of the real responsibilities is not just to fulfill our obligations to our NATO allies, not just to make sure that we can sail ships into the Indo-Pacific. Both of those are important. Not just in that absolutely essential relationship which is NORAD with the United States. But we have a responsibility ourselves to defend our country. Like the first responsibility of any government is the national defense of its country. And we simply have to do more in defending Canada's interests around the world because, again, the nature of warfare is changing. And our adversaries, potentially hostile adversaries, they're investing in their capabilities to threaten us. And the best way to respond to that risk is to be prepared. And to build resilience and preparedness. As I said, increased production is deterrence. Being prepared is deterrence. The best way to peace is to prepare to keep the peace. And so those are investments we just have to make.
Now I can see Yuri signaling me, so I'm going to very publicly ask you if you still want me to go to the iPad that I do not know how to operate. So I'm an elder millennial, the ones who didn't always have the internet. Yeah.
And
it's the worst of both worlds.
I'm not even a millennial. I'm the boomer on the stage. So.
You have at least one supporter out there. There you go. Okay, well then we'll wrap it up there. I know we started a little bit late, so we want to get you back on track. Thank you very much, Minister. And I know we're all looking forward to that defense policy review and the exact numbers in the budget.
It's coming soon?
I heard something out soon, yeah. Thanks so much for taking the time to come by today and to talk to us.
Thank you, Mercedes. And while I've still got the mic, I want to take the opportunity to thank all of you and everyone in the Canadian Defence Association, all of its members, for your partnership, for your commitment, for many of you, for your decades of service to this country. We need your help. I need your help. To do better, we have to do better. And so I just want to commend you to that work and assure you that I and my government and the team at Defence are absolutely committed to getting done what needs to get done. Thanks very much.